This is the artificial intelligence voice of Bill Maher narrating this pod slice summary of the Club Random podcast. The podcast kicks off with host Bill Maher and guest Oliver Stone sharing memories from their early interviews. I dive into reminiscing about old times and discuss Stone's appearance on Bill's old show, Politically Incorrect in the 90s. Stone also touches upon an uncomfortable interview experience on The Colbert Show where he felt the host, Stephen Colbert, hadn't properly prepared and didn't offer a balanced discussion. The conversation then moves to politics and international affairs, with Maher expressing his dislike for Vladimir Putin, despite Stone's attempt to challenge the status quo in his documentary on the Russian leader. They engage in a lively discussion about the portrayal of Russia in Western media. The two then shift gears and tackle the topic of COVID-19. Maher laments the rise of germophobia among the young, and Stone shares his travels, including his time in Russia during the pandemic. Now the confusion surrounding the different types of vaccines is also addressed, with Stone revealing that he had to take different vaccines due to travel requirements. They also discuss the origin of COVID-19 and share the idea that it might have stemmed from a lab leak, with neither Stone nor Maher presenting any concrete proof. Maher indicates that this question should be a scientific one, not political. Lastly, they discuss the potential of making a movie about COVID-19, which Stone dismisses, citing the numerous sensitivities involved and his reluctance to chase trending news stories. Maher and Stone delve into a detailed discussion on common health concerns and controversies. Reminiscing their youth when the polio outbreak took place, Stone emphasizes how he and many others willingly took the polio vaccine without question, but his certainty on vaccination takes a turn after he encounters people affected adversely by vaccines. Eisnet, he brings up the example of Tony Lyons' daughter, whose mental capabilities were affected by the smallpox vaccine. The conversation drifts to the topic of medical information and how it is developed and disseminated over time, and how there are significant gaps in our understanding of the human body and how it works. The dialogue takes a political turn as they move to Biden's administration's stand on compulsory vaccination. Maher indicates his disdain for the authoritarian approach to vaccination, while Stone remarks that people dislike being commanded, evident in the response to the vaccine mandate. The focus then shifts to the baffling state of contemporary politics. Stone seems incredulous about Trump's loss in the election. Maher expresses his frustrations with individuals unwilling to acknowledge the legitimacy of the election results, citing that the legitimacy was upheld in 60 courts, even by Republican judges. Stone engages Maher by hinting at parallel examples of election fraud he perceived in the past. The conversation spirals into a discourse on election integrity, with Maher defending the 2020 election results ardently. Maher also voices his dissatisfaction with the overtly biased representation of news, while discussing a CNN town hall featuring Trump. Maher believes overt bias dilutes informative news narratives, reflecting an echo chamber rather than reporting. They then undertake a lively debate on people's fascination with underdogs, observing how the media's constant bashing of personalities like Trump and Pete Rose have made them popular figures among masses due to a sort of media backlash effect. Finally, they transition the conversation to the matter of Stone potentially making a sports movie. They compare Trump's enthusiastic confidence to Pete Rose betting on his own team during his baseball career. This segment of the conversation wraps with a brief discussion on right-wing politics, including their influence over the 2000 election and implications on America's societal and political health. Amid laughter and camaraderie, Maher and Stone dissect a diverse spread of subjects. They begin by discussing Stone's laborious documentary-making process, using an example of a scene from On Nixon. Maher and Stone then reminisce about Larry Hagman, famed for his acting in daily marijuana-laden biscuits. They also touch upon the themes of Stone's varied filmography, which range from politics to football. They dive deep into the dilemma of vaccinations, presenting different perspectives, Sean Penn's extensive work on vaccinations comes up, with Stone revealing that he got his vaccine from Penn. Despite acknowledging the importance of vaccines, there's an undertone of hesitance and ambiguity. Eyes on the unanswered questions about COVID-19. Was it a lab leak or developed for militaristic motives? As their conversation unfolds, the existence of American labs in Ukraine comes under a cloud of suspicion. Maher and Stone lock horns on this complex issue, with Stone hinting at sub-rosa activities. They probe controversial elements such as potential development of harmful pathogens and hidden experiments. Their dialogue encapsulates the grim reality of food production, noting its disastrous effects on the cause of future pandemics. They talk about how poorly treated and stress-induced animals eventually impact human health due to overuse of antibiotics. This leads to Stone referring to Bobby Kennedy Jr.'s book that criticizes the pharmaceutical industry's detrimental influence on AIDS treatment. While discussing the poisoning of a retired Russian KGB agent, Stone casts doubt on London's intelligence agencies and hints at a narrative more multifaceted than meets the eye. They wrap up this part of the chat by evaluating Western suspicion and ill-feeling towards Russia, an attitude reminiscent of a Star Trek-like scenario of pitting good against bad. Stone questions NATO's purpose and usefulness and criticizes its stance against Russia following the fall of the Soviet Union. But this discussion ends on a rather unusual note. How coincidental plane crashes, revolutions, and Kremlin politics all intertwine. They esteem Gorbachev's bloodless revolution and condemn Yeltsin for the loss of Russia's sovereignty. They contemplate the persistent anti-Soviet sentiment of the Narrowcon Pact and the ill-informed allegory of Russia to the Soviet Union. Farmer and Stone offer a profound insight into Russian President Putin. Stone, who had personally interacted with Putin, explains his belief in Putin's genuine intent to assimilate Russia into Western models of economic growth and prosperity. Maher, skeptical, alludes to Putin's questionable approach in pursuing this goal. They dissect Putin's perception of the West as decadent, leading to a rather animated discussion on whether Republicans are pro or anti-Russian. Diving deeper into Russia's socio-economic landscape, Stone heaps praise on Putin for his efforts to pull Russia out of crippling poverty, restore dignity, and recover from Yeltsin's disastrous reign. Yet, Stone says the West turned against Putin around 2007. WWIII's Wall Street's desire to own Russia to vultures, attracted by the power vacuum post the Soviet Union's collapse. In terms of foreign relations, Stone mentions ex-Soviet leader Gorbachev's earlier reservation towards Putin. He quotes Gorbachev's disapproval of the American intervention in Ukraine in 2016 that worsened the politically fraught situation. Maher and Stone agree that the fear of NATO was justifiable for Russia, which found the alliance ominously close to its doorstep, notwithstanding the assurances given by the West. Pivoting towards individuals who stood their ground, Stone talks about meeting Snowden in Russia. Both hosts admire Snowden's willingness to sacrifice his country for his beliefs. Another such figure they admire is Julian Assange, whom they credit for his relentless pursuit of truth, regardless of personal cost. Throughout their conversation, their analyses are punctuated by lighthearted moments. For instance, when Maher jests about Putin poisoning people at dinner, Stone retorts that Maher's nature as a comedian keeps them from getting on common ground. Another comedic interlude occurs when Maher casually mentions Pamela Anderson's visits to Assange. Despite these lighter moments, the overall tone of their discussion remains analytical and introspectively dense, with a focus on global politics, personalities, and world events. While building on the previous conversation in the Club Random podcast, where host Bill Maher and Oliver Stone are discussing figures like Edward Snowden and Julian Assange, we see them veering into the life of Snowden in Russia. Snowden, who had fled to Russia from Hong Kong fearing extradition, is shown to have adapted to his life there, learning Russian, marrying his American girlfriend, and starting a family. Maher and Stone discuss how Snowden's choice to resist the American government has led to unexpected consequences for his life. The hosts delve into an introspective discourse on the challenges a modern president faces, drawing parallels between the hardline national security policies of former U.S. President Obama and Russian President Putin. Through a cacophony of jests, understanding, and disagreements, they delve into the complexities inherent in wielding power, which often requires making difficult decisions, often colored by extenuating circumstances and pressing threats. The conversation then shifts to a comparison of the British and Russian empires. While Stone is critical of the Britain Empire, Maher appreciates its culture but admits to the empire's arrogance. Stone, on the other hand, insists that Putin wouldn't be in power if he didn't have the people's consent, thereby implying a form of democracy in operation in Russia. Maher and Stone then revisit incidents of conflict involving Russia, like the attack on the Crimean Bridge and the safety risks the informers face when delivering bad news to Putin. Pushing back on popular narratives, Stone argues that Putin is more businesslike and pragmatic than intimidating or dictatorial, as is often portrayed in Western media. Finally, they reach a contentious point discussing the allegations of Putin killing journalists. While Maher believes this is likely true, Stone disagrees, arguing it wouldn't make sense for Putin to kill a journalist, as it would draw more negative attention to him. They touch on the Magnitsky Act and speculate about its origins, with Stone expressing skepticism about the mainstream narrative. This discussion paints a vivid tableau of the complexities surrounding international politics, perceived threats, and the wielders of power, whether in the West or the East. The hosts continued their debate, diving into the intricacies of politics in and around Ukraine. Stone argues that despite widely held beliefs, Putin has allowed room for opposition within his political climates, most notably manifested in the reemergence of Gorbachev's nearing mindset. In their discussion of world leaders, Stone suggests Nelson Mandela employed certain judicial strategies similar to those of de Klerk, while Maher interjects, pointing out the relevance of Obama to the narrative. Stone emphasizes, however, that the transition made from a suppressive state to a democratic one is the crucial point. Maher and Stone then move towards examining the struggle for autonomy within different global regions. Considering if more countries might cultivate healthier relations, they touch on recent historical events in Crimea, displaying the region's desire for closer alignment with Russia as opposed to Ukraine. Stone argues that the West often ridicules such pursuits of autonomy, a move he deems unjust. The conversation takes an interesting turn as Stone compares Ukraine to an open salad bar when discussing its relationship with Western countries, viz. Arms. Stone critiques the Biden administration's policy towards Ukraine as merely a ploy to weaken Russia, a tactic he severely doubts will work. Maher and Stone then touch on the recent send-off of defense missiles to Ukraine by the Biden administration. Stone sees this as an offensive move, contrary to Maher, who believes it's a defensive one. Suggesting the potential escalation to a World War II scenario, Stone warns against taking such situations too lightly. Lastly, the discussion pivots to the alleged greed of neoconservatives via using Ukraine as a proxy to undermine and exploit Russia for selfish gains. Although engaged in a fiery and contentious debate, Maher and Stone managed to shed light on the complexities of international politics, alluding to the intricacies of power, resistance, and strategic expansion. The conversation takes a fascinating turn when Maher and Stone delve into the world of nuclear energy. Maher starts off by advocating for a logical and dispassionate decision on the matter, implying his agreement with Stone's beliefs. Stone, however, disagrees unexpectedly, highlighting cases such as Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island, and Fukushima. Contrary to popular belief, Stone declares these incidents exaggerated, dismissing the common perception that nuclear accidents result in catastrophic damage. I touch on the politics of energy as well, discussing how the Japanese shut down their reactors after Fukushima, an action Stone interprets as a mistake as the country is now gradually re-engaging with nuclear energy again. Maher, however, brings another perspective to the table, asserting that acknowledging the potential risks of nuclear energy, such as waste, is essential. Stone counters this with an argument about the exaggeration of these risk factors. Switching gears, The duo then discusses Oliver Stone's illustrious filmmaking career. Bill compliments Stone's ability to make movies not just entertaining but meaningful and prods him to make more films in lieu of documentaries. Stone, in response, speaks candidly about the challenges of securing financing and actors for his films, reflecting on experiences from making Nixon and Snowden. Bay also broached the subject of Nixon and George W. Bush's presidency. Stone contrasts the two leaders, describing Bush as a man of lesser intelligence compared to Nixon and attributing Bush's ascension to power to nepotism. Further, they evaluate the deteriorating standards of American politics post-Kennedy's era, and Stone emphasizes the need for good leadership. Delving into their personal experiences, both Maher and Stone recall encounters with student politics from their school days, drawing parallels with current political figures. They lament the state of politics where leadership frequently fails to reflect the will of the people. As their conversation unfolds, Bill and Oliver touch on issues bearing deeper societal and political implications, e.g. elections influenced by wealth and power, and dissect intriguing aspects of individual figures in politics and the entertainment industry. Their dialogue navigates the tension between loyalty and power, the perception of leadership, the politicization of energy, and the intricacies of a filmmaker's journey. In the continuation of their conversation, Maher and Stone share a more lighthearted discussion, talking about personal life. Stone talks about his wife's sense of humor and her struggle to speak English. He leans into his belief that one can manifest things using the example of how he received a doll that he had wished for during Christmas in the 1950s. Coming back to serious political discourse, they discuss how leaders can sometimes speak out of hand and make exaggerated statements. When the conversation shifts to Israel again, Stone shares an anecdote from an interview he had with Netanyahu whilst a bomb exploded near the location. Importance of security for countries in precarious geopolitical situations like Israel comes under focus next. Discussing Netanyahu's tough security measures, Stone expresses his belief that these measures represent more of Netanyahu's reaction to terrorists rather than a fair reflection of Palestinian intentions. Farmer agrees on the importance of security for Israel. He likens the historical negotiations between Israel and Palestine to fluctuating football trade deals, emphasizing how the refusal to accept deals at the right time by Palestine has led to their present disadvantage. Points out the delusion of believing that Israel would disappear, emphasizing the need for Palestinians to face the reality that Israel is not going anywhere. The dialogue proceeds to the historical rights to the land of Israel, with Maher comparing the Jews in Israel to the natives in America, pointing out their presence in the land long before the birth of Muhammad. This leads to a brief foray into the history of Jerusalem, prompting Maher and Stone to discuss the Crusades, signifying a deeper dive into history and religion and their implications on the present geopolitical landscape. The podcast moves into a deeper commentary on complex world politics, with Stone attributing the current issues faced by Palestine to Germany's historic guilt. There were strong accusations thrown against Netanyahu, condemning his alleged forceful eviction of 2.5 million people. The controversial politics of Gaza and the West Bank are also deliberated, with the disputed legitimacy of elections that brought factions like Hamas to power, with critics labeling them as terrorist organizations. They transition into the topic of Biden's foreign policy, with Stone noticing a psychopathic trend in Biden's perspective of Russia. However, in Stone's opinion, voting for candidates purely based on their stance on specific issues is unwise. Maher and Stone then clash on their views of Hillary Clinton, prompting a detailed exploration of her controversy-filled tenure as Secretary of State, criticism that extends to positions she held or actions she took involving Libya and accusations of dishonesty. Appreciation is exchanged between the hosts, with Maher expressing admiration for the body of work that Stone and Fluent a Kid has created, taking their viewers through complex chapters of history and politics while also providing entertainment. As the conversation ends, they venture into the territory of new age predicaments facing the film industry, like the advent of AI and deepfakes in pornographic content. The ethical dimensions of age manipulation and casting paradigms in Hollywood are mused upon as the wonders of technology seemingly cross lines with reality, potentially putting younger actors out of work. They discuss the complex legalities, both laughing and lamenting the cinematic minefield this could lead to. Holistically, the podcast sees Stone and Maher diving headfirst into a thrilling sea of political discourse, personal anecdotes, and engaging debates on the evolving landscape of the film industry. Check out the full podcast by clicking the link in the description below. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for listening to this podcast summary episode of The Pod Slice.